Today we listen in on the subject of the Samsung A15 5G, a budget phone that came out in the very end of 2023 or very beginning of 2024 depending on the country, and whether or not it's worthy buying 2 years later. This is Real World Review production, starring good and bad. Let's see what they have to say. I know you want to complain about something.
Yes. Thank you for asking. I can't stand this phone.
Really? I thought it was a good phone.
How? This is such a miserable experience and kind of felt pointless. I feel like I was detoxing from the Samsung A51 5G. I actually wanted to use this phone to get beyond that, but this somehow feels worse.
Well, I feel like we didn't really have the same phone. For $200 new, it actually feels great. And let me check real quick. Wow, these are under $100 on Swap right now. Look at this.
There is no amount of money that would make this phone worth it. Maybe 10 bucks? I don't know. The processor is the MediaTek Dimensity 6100 Plus, and it's terrible. And it can't really be because this is only the 4GB model. I know they have like a 6GB model, but it can't be simply low RAM causing all these issues.
It was good enough for me, but how does it affect the battery life?
Are you kidding me? Waking this phone was a chore. Sometimes it would show like, look, I just clicked the button and it took so long for it to recognize. It takes a couple seconds. Other times I'm just fighting the reaction speed and I'm just wondering if it even registered the click like you just saw just now. The lack of the always on display definitely doesn't help. The battery life, I will admit, is a little bit better than I would expect. I would end most days at about like 80%, while my iPhone would be more like 50% by bedtime. This has a 5,000 milliamp battery, so I guess it's pretty good, and 25 watts of charging. Sounds good, but isn't really realistic. I would say I would get maybe like 15 to 18 watts on most chargers.
Okay, sure, the battery isn't large, and of course it isn't charging at 15 to 25 watts the whole time, but 1 to 2% per minute is pretty good. The USB-C port is 2.0 speeds and is reasonable for, the model. And hey, what about that headset jack?
The headset jack? I never really use it.
Yeah, I never did either.
I do use the side-mounted fingerprint scanner, which I think is always the best place to put it.
Wait, that sounds like a positive.
But like I said, the phone's reaction time is so slow, making it kind of not work in some cases.
And there it is.
Face unlock was the same too. I found that many times it just simply wouldn't work, even in well-lit areas.
Well, what do you think about the size? A 6.5-inch screen is pretty good.
I mean, it's not a super tall phone, but the obsession with making phones so large is just annoying. It's 200 grams in weight, and it doesn't really make sense because it's, plastic frame, plastic back, OLED screen, but somehow this 6.3-inch tall phone is fairly heavy. Kind of thick at that 8.4 millimeters.
Well, some people like tall phones, and I guess you don't. But you brought up the screen, 90 hertz, bright OLED screen, 1080p even.
Yeah, I'm not really a fan of big phones anymore, but while viewing is good in my eyes, again, whenever your CPU is running on this phone, there's going to be problems. I would even scroll on social media, and some of the videos would just be super choppy and not really work. Then there's the one speaker on the bottom.
Yeah, but there's a speaker at the top as well.
No, I mean there's no stereo speakers, like just the single one on the bottom. The earpiece is exactly that, an earpiece, just like on the Samsung A14. But something like a Moto G 2023 has dual speakers. So what's up with that? Even the Samsung A17 doesn't even have stereo speakers.
Wait, seriously?
The vibrating motor seems to be a little bit better than it has been on previous phones, especially because it's, a whole plastic phone, but it's not really that great in the grand scheme of everything. And since it has a 90 hertz OLED screen, the screen is more expensive than a normal LCD phone.
Now that you mention it, I couldn't really tell that it was 90 hertz.
And yeah, the screen, that's a common thing on budget phones. It's 90 or 120 hertz and still looks pretty bad.
Well, do I dare ask you about the cameras?
Well, there, I guess, is some good. The main camera is a usable 50 megapixel camera that bends down to 12 megapixels. There's apparently no optical image stabilization, and, well, I guess it's not really that great. The 5 megapixel ultra wide is exactly what it sounds like. Who even made that camera? It seems like a weird megapixel count for even a budget phone.
You didn't think the cameras were good? I mean, for a budget phone, it's decent, right?
Right, but don't throw a 50 megapixel camera in a phone unless you want it to be good. That's what 48 megapixel sensors are for. Or just make something weird like 52 so then people know that it's a high megapixel, but it's not really that good. Then we have that 2 megapixel macro camera, which sounds exactly like how it looks. Not that great. Then we have that 13 megapixel front camera, which again, it's a 13 megapixel front camera, and I've said in the past many times, it's not good. I mean, really, I don't even know any 13 megapixel cameras that are actually good.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm guessing you probably aren't going to be a fan of the 1080p 30 frames per second video. You know what? Save it. Well, what do you like about the phone?
Not much.
Come on.
Well, the battery's good. It might be because it doesn't really get much done, but the A51 4G is a slower phone and it's really bad, and a similar battery. This doesn't feel like a phone that I could break, so I guess that's kind of good. I didn't really want to use this phone, but I feel like that's kind of a good thing. I like being in real life and not feeling like I'm stuck to my phone. It lets me focus on doing calls and texting because content viewing wasn't always optimal in a way. The phone is actually bad, but it's kind of great. Well, I mean, I'm glad that I'm not using this phone anymore, but having a phone that will last you a couple days and maybe even longer on a full charge is kind of cool. It's one less thing to worry about if you're someone who's coming from like an old flip phone.
Interesting.
Besides the screen being expensive, all the other parts are fairly cheap and somewhat easy to replace, I guess if you know how to do repairs.
That's a new one.
So in a sense, I would say that it's actually a good phone.
Wait, really? I didn't expect.
But I also think that this phone is pure e-waste and no one should really buy it.
Yep, there we go.